Hi everybody, welcome back. So today I'm going to do a little speech, I guess, about why you should or maybe shouldn't read classics. So classics are the books that you probably were required to read in high school and college and those kind of things that maybe you liked them, maybe you didn't. And most of them were written like a long time ago. But remember, like all the books that we read now, some of them will probably be classics at some point. The ones that speak about what life's like right now and kind of express the world as we know it. So I enjoy classics, some of them. I don't like all of them. And there's some good reasons to read them. There's probably some good reasons not to read them. So here's why you should read classics. First of all, they're cheap, especially if you buy them on the Kindle. I've gotten maybe like 50 books for 99 cents. Sometimes you can even find them for free. I've actually found several for free that are classics. And as far as finding free books on the Kindle, there is always some, but the classics are the better written ones. Sometimes when you buy the free books on the Kindle, though, even the classics, there are some problems with them. There's some, they didn't get translated well or something like that. So you do have to run into that. But then if you buy them, even if you spend 99 cents for 50 of them, those ones are usually a lot better edited and things like that. So just buy the 99-cent one. You got 50 books for 99 cents. Another great thing about classics is the characters in them are amazing. They're usually really in-depth, and they have a lot of layers to them. And it's, when you read them, or when I read them, I find like, wow, like I really connect with this character because I see why they do the things that they do. And a lot of times in books anymore, the characters aren't very well developed, but I find in classics they're a lot better developed, at least most of the time. The other thing about classics is they're great stories. And these are stories that we all know, like Sherlock Holmes. And think about how many movies and TV series have been based off of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's work of Sherlock Holmes. They just keep coming because these were great stories that people loved. Shakespeare, you know, this was written how long ago? Shakespeare is still used today. A lot of the things that he did in his plays are used today in all the books that we read. A lot of Shakespeare's characters were morally gray characters. They made really poor decisions, but you really got inside their head and figured out like why they made them. Not only that, think about how many movies are based off of Shakespeare's plays. You know, if you read the originals, then you see them everywhere. Another one was The Song of Roland. And this is a classic. This is like one of the first known writings of like Charlemagne and the wars surrounding in that era. And I can't tell you how many times that I've read this battle in other books. And I always go like, well, that sounds just like Song of Roland. And a lot of times, like, the author will put a little caveat at the end and say, like, this is the battle that is represented in the Song of Roland. And if you don't think that they're bloody, like, this is horribly bloody. Shakespeare is horribly bloody. I mean, people get their hearts cut out and all sorts of things. You know, in Song of Roland, they cut a horse in half. You know, these are kind of the inspiration for all of the books that we read now. Well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. One of the other things I found about classics is that they're quite surprising. I read Jane Austen for the first time, and while I myself don't enjoy romances, like, I didn't hate it. And I liked the portrayal of the time period, that it was like, oh, this is what was going on in this time period. And so many times when I read something modern written for the time period that is surrounding Jane Austen, I find that the characters they're trying to make them think the way that we think, or portray things the way that we portray things. And that's just kind of not the way people were. So when I read classics, I'm like, oh, that's the way that people thought at that time. Another surprising read was Wuthering Heights. I always thought this book was kind of the quintessential romance book. And when I read it, I discovered it's just not a romance. You know, this is really a tragedy. This is more of like an anti-romance. The people in here are not nice. And they hurt each other and everyone around them because they can't be together. So that's kind of my take on classics. That's why I love them. And I can't say I love all of them, but those are the things that I like about the ones that I like. Now here are some of the things that I don't like. Maybe these are reasons that maybe you shouldn't read them, or what makes them hard. The first is the prose. A lot of times there's really flowery prose in there, and it takes a long time for things to happen because they're so descriptive. And sometimes the description might take away from the plot a little bit. Second is the length. This is quite the brick. This is almost 1,500 pages. And not only that, especially in this one, especially in Les Mis, like there are chapters and chapters that talk about the French Revolution that have nothing to do whatsoever with the story. So you kind of have to weed through all of that. And classics are like that. A lot of times they have things that are fairly irrelevant in them. The other thing is there's a lot of sexism, racism, all of that kind of stuff in classics because that's the way that life was at that point. And if you look at Shakespeare, there is certainly some sexism and racism in his plays, and people will go, well, was he racist? And it's possible, highly possible that he was, because that was the way people were at that time. And for us to kind of think like, oh, well, no, he was above that because he's Shakespeare, is probably not very likely. So you will run into that. Oscar Wilde, there's a lot of racism and sexism and stuff in his books. And I guess the last thing that's hard about classics, sometimes you just wonder what the heck's going on. They have things in there that might be a little bit difficult to understand. But, you just kind of muddle through them. They went on this tangent, or you're reading The Last of the Mohicans, and they're describing every leaf on the tree as you're walking through the trees, as you're walking through the forest, and you're going like, what's going on? What's so special about this tree? Nothing, he's just describing it. So my favorite classics are going to be like Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, the Song of Roland, and I don't think this has the author is not known, this is anonymous. William Shakespeare, anything by William Shakespeare I think is usually great, even though it's hard to understand sometimes. Another one of my favorites is Edgar Allan Poe, anything written by Edgar Allan Poe. Sometimes when I've read different things by him, I feel like, if I was a crazy person, that's exactly the way that I would think, or exactly might be the way that I saw the world. So I really enjoy most of his stories and poems. Another one, Lord of the Rings, obviously the quintessential fantasy, and also the Narnia books. Those are all classics. Those were the first kind of fantasy novels that were written by Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. So if you want to get into classics, I would say, pick one up, see if you like it. There are probably better places to start than others. I would start with kind of the shorter ones. I have 1984, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Yellow Wallpaper, The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Those are short, so you can get through them pretty quick, and you can see if you like them or not. And obviously there are some that are easier to read than others, and some of the easier ones to read would be like Call of the Wild, the Anne of Green Gables series, Huckleberry Finn, The Secret Garden, Peter Pan, those kind of things. All these books that you've heard about, all these books that you see being made into movies over and over again. These are really great. I like them a lot, and it never hurts to give them a try. So that's why I think you should read classics, or maybe why you shouldn't. It's all up to you. I'm not going to say like, oh, well, only cool people read classics, because, some people don't like them. So anyway, that's my video today. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe. I post new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays.